Hi, my name is Courtney Sullivan, and I'm the Career Counselor and Career Services at Purdue University, Fort Wayne. We are located in Kettler Hall, room 109, and you can reach us at the phone number listed or email us at careerservices@pfw.edu. Today, I'm going to be talking about interviewing techniques. So, to start off with, there are various types of interviews. One of them might be a more traditional or structured interview. So if you apply to a position and an employer wants to do an interview with you, they might ask you to come to that company for about an hour, and you might be interviewing with the hiring manager or the direct supervisor that you would be reporting to if you were to get hired for that position. And they might spend that time asking you questions that they had prepared in advance, and then give you a little bit of time after the interview to ask questions that you may have. Some companies will have second round of interviews and third round of interviews. So if you make it past the first round of interviews and they still like you, they might ask you to do a second round of interview. And then if they still like you, they might ask you to come for the third round of interviews, and that's where they're narrowing down the applicant pool. So you might be at least in the top 2, or if the top 3 if you make it to the third round of interviews. The first round might be a phone interview, and the second round might be a video call interview, and then the third round might be an in-person interview, depending on how the company has it organized. So you might get asked to do a phone interview, and that might be a 30 to a 60-minute phone call with the employer. Again, they will ask you questions and then give you a little bit of time to ask questions that you may have after the phone call. You might also do a video call. So when you do a video call, you want to make sure that your equipment is working. They might do it over Skype or over Zoom, but just make sure you've practiced ahead of time and your video works and your audio works, and that you're dressed professionally. Obviously, they can't tell what you're wearing in a phone interview, but sometimes it might make you feel more confident if you're dressed for the interview, even if you are doing it over the phone. But for the video call, please make sure that you're still dressed professionally and that you don't have a distracting background. Try to keep it plain. Also, be aware of the noises around you, so make sure you're doing it in a quiet place, in a place that has good internet, so you won't get slowed down doing the video call with the employer. But again, I highly suggest just practicing everything ahead of time so you know that everything works okay. That way, when you do the interview with the employer, you won't run into any snags or anything like that. It can be frustrating for the employer if they're trying to do an interview with you and you can't get the video to work or you can't get the audio to work. So again, I would just suggest doing a practice call with a friend or family member, or with someone in our office as well. Another type of interview that's a little more awkward is a meal interview. So an employer might ask you to do an interview over breakfast or over lunch. I would say they're less common, but can be a little more awkward because you're eating while talking. So just be conscious of what you're ordering when you're doing an interview over a meal. You don't want to order anything too expensive, and I would just let the employer order first and kind of gauge where they're at, and then order after them. Even if they're offering to pay, I would just keep it in the medium price range. So this might be something that you're asked to do, especially if you have an interview scheduled for all day, and a portion of it might be over breakfast or it might be over lunch. Another type of interview is a career fair interview. So employers might be attending career fairs, and for them it just might be more convenient to do interviews right there on the spot while they're there, or they might do them before the career fair or after the career fair, or sometimes even the day before or the day after, while they're already in that area, so they can get face-to-face contact with people who are interested in that position or various positions if they have multiple. Especially for college campuses, usually there are interview rooms that employers can use, and again, while they're already on site, it might just be more convenient for them to interview students while they're on campus. So just be aware that could be another type of interview you get asked to do. Another one is a committee interview. So this is where multiple people are interviewing you from the organization. So they might take turns asking you questions, and then they'll rate you, and then they'll come together as a committee and make a decision on the candidates. So this one, if you do a committee interview, make sure that you're trying to make eye contact with every person in the room with you, and you're switching your focus to everyone and not just focused on one person. It can be a little difficult to do that. It's already hard enough to maintain eye contact, let alone with multiple people, but just be aware of that. Again, we can practice doing a committee interview in our office if that's something that you're interested in. I would say another type of interview that is a lot more awkward is a group interview. So you might have multiple people who are interested in that company or interested in that same position interview with you with the employer. So you might be interviewing with someone who's competing for the same position. Sometimes it's nice because employers will have multiple positions open, and so they might be able to hire multiple people from the group interview, but sometimes they're trying to narrow it down, and it's a little bit awkward seeing your competition there and interviewing against that person or multiple people. So if you don't know what the format of the interview would be like, if you get asked to do an interview, it's perfectly fine to ask ahead of time and get an idea of what to be prepared for. Again, I just want to emphasize, if you're doing an interview over the phone or over a video call, please make sure you test your equipment and everything is okay and you're in a quiet spot, nothing too distracting, and you're dressed professionally if you're on video. So moving on, before the interview, you definitely want to make sure you're doing your research ahead of time, so looking at the organizational structure. So who's in the leadership positions, who's reporting to who, where does that position that you're interviewing for fit into the entire organizational structure of the company, looking at those kinds of things. You also want to look at the philosophy or mission of the company, get an idea of what their values are, what they believe in, and things like that. Also, it's very important to know the products and services that that company provides, who their customers are, and what their competition might be. They might ask you specific questions about their products and services during the interview, so that's why it's really a good idea to look into that ahead of time. You might want to check out their annual report and the news and press releases just to gauge where that company is currently at, how well they're doing, what's been going on in that organization. Just be aware, if there is anything significant that you know about it. Again, you never know what would come up during the interview, so just look at these things before so you feel prepared. Looking at the job description, making sure that you understand that job completely. Again, they might ask you questions. What is it about this job that specifically interests you? So you want to know what that job is, what they're asking for, what it might look like, what their responsibilities are, and then you also want to know how your skills and qualifications align with that job, because you're going to be talking about that during the interview. Some other resources for research are Glassdoor.com. So different people can go on there and rate companies, and there's a section that you can even look at to see if there's any interview questions that people who have interviewed at that company or organization before have been asked those questions. They might post them on Glassdoor, so you can kind of get an idea of what an employer might be asking you ahead of time based on what other people have been asked in the past. Another resource that you can use to look up the reputation of an employer is Vault.com. So making sure that you get an idea of this company and if it's a place that you can see yourself working, and then if you can get an idea of what questions you might be asked. Also look at the company website, know what their brand is, what's important to them, follow them on their social media pages, know what's going on with them, and they also might post different positions on their social media. So if you're not following them already and you're interested in a company, I would just go ahead and follow them so you can stay up to date about what opportunities there are within that company or organization. Preparing for the interview, so you want to make sure that you develop questions to ask the interviewer. So as much as they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them as well. You want to get an idea if this is a place where you can see yourself working at, what the culture is like, and again, just reiterating your interest in the position. It's a good idea to do a practice interview, so set up a mock interview with our office or practice with a friend or family member. That way you can get valuable feedback before you go in and do the real interview. And again, the more you practice, the easier it is to just response to questions that you're going to get asked. So make sure that you do a practice interview. I highly suggest it. I know it can be awkward because you're kind of role playing, but it does get easier and easier the more that you do interviews and the more you practice responding to multiple questions. And then it's a good idea to just have questions prepared in advance, even if they don't, or have responses prepared in advance, even if they don't ask you a question that goes with your response. Usually they ask you something similar that you can kind of fit in that response somehow or that experience into the interview. So just look at your resume and think about things that you want to highlight during the interview, different experience, different accomplishments that you have, or different things that you're really proud of from your past experiences. So definitely practice that. Also bring copies of your updated resume. If they ask for references or a portfolio or professional binder, make sure you have that. But you want to make sure that you bring enough copies of your resume for everyone that might be interviewing that day. So it's okay to ask them how many people to expect. That way you can bring enough copies of your resume and then make sure it's updated. Again, you can have us do a resume review before. Ideally before you apply to the job, but even if you get it updated before you go to the interview, I would suggest doing that. Know the location of where you're going to do the interview. So they might send you directions. If not, it's okay to ask for directions. Know where to park. Some employers might require you to have a parking pass. Also know where to enter. So different places might be gated off and they have multiple entrances and they want you to go through a specific entrance. Make sure you know what it is. Also, I think it's a good idea if you practice driving there if it's close enough. That way you get a sense of how long it takes you, and that way you're not worried about getting lost. But I would just make sure that you're prepared for unexpected events that might come up, such as traffic or a car accident, and that you're giving yourself enough time for those kinds of things if they were to happen. Even if you get there really early and you're waiting in the parking lot until it gets closer to your interview and then you feel comfortable going in, that's perfectly fine. But just be aware that something might happen and an employer will not like it if you're late. Even if you have an excuse, I would still try to get there early enough just in case anything were to happen. I mentioned this before, but if they don't give you the format of the interview, you can always request that and ask for the interviewer's name. Again, you want to make sure you bring enough copies of your resume for each person interviewing you. And then plan what to wear in advance. That way you're taking less time to pick out an outfit the day of the interview. And you try it on and feel comfortable. Make sure that also you know, for example, they might have you do a tour of the company. Make sure that you have shoes that are still formal enough but comfortable enough to walk around in if they are requiring you to walk around. But I'm going to get more in depth into what to wear on the next slide. So appropriate dress. So you want to dress for the job. Have you ever heard of the saying, dress for the job you want? So I would say that if you want to be a CEO or someone high up in the company, that you're dressing that way. It just gives a really good impression to the employer. So that might include wearing a suit and conservative tie for men, or for women wearing a blazer with dress slacks or a skirted business suit. I would stick to neutral colors, blacks or blues or grays, sometimes tan, but I would say black, blue, and gray are the safer options. Don't wear too much perfume or cologne. Some people can be very sensitive to that and it might be distracting during the interview. Also be aware of your accessories. Those can be distracting if you're wearing bracelets that cling and you're moving your wrists a lot or something like that. So just be aware of multiple different things. Also, you want to have your hair neat. Have it, for women, you can have it down or pulled back. For men, I would try to stay clean shaven if you can. Again, just be aware of these things. You can refer to our career guide on page 60 for more information about what to wear during an interview. So do's during an interview. Like I mentioned, I would say it's a really good idea to arrive early. I know one employer that he really likes the saying, if you're 10 minutes early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. So I would just always give yourself enough time, even if you are waiting in the parking lot. It's just better to be safe than sorry. Do greet everyone with respect. Every single person that you're coming into contact with, if it's the receptionist or the secretary, or someone on HR that you're talking on the phone with before the interview, and just make sure that you're being polite to everyone, because individuals in that company will talk to each other, and if you give one person a bad impression, they might say that to someone else, and then that might affect your chances of getting hired. So just be nice and polite to everyone that you're interacting with for the interview. Do answer questions truthfully. It will look really bad if you get caught in a lie. So just make sure you're being honest to the employer when you're getting asked questions. Do put a positive spin on negative answers. So if they ask a question about your weaknesses that may seem a little more negative, try to bring a positive spin to that. So how your strengths might compensate for your weaknesses, or how you're working on your weaknesses and improving upon that. It's absolutely okay to take time to reflect before answering a question. So don't feel like you have to get rushed into responding to a question during an interview. It's okay to take a pause. I would be aware that you don't want to take too long of a pause where you don't seem prepared, but you can take a minute to think about how you want to answer that question or what experience you want to bring up, things like that. Do ask questions about the company and organization. Like I mentioned, this shows that you're doing your research, and as much as they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them and want to get a good feel if this is a company you want to work for, and if it's a positive environment that you can see yourself in. Do maintain good eye contact and body posture. One thing that I've noticed is that when individuals are kind of thinking of how to respond to a question, they won't make eye contact. They're kind of looking away, trying to rack their brain for an answer, and that employers can definitely tell that. So the more that you practice, the easier it is to maintain that eye contact, because you already have a response prepared. Also be aware of your body language. You don't want to seem so closed off. You also want to be aware if you are bouncing your leg, that can be distracting, or if you're using too much hand movements during the interview, that can be distracting as well. So just be aware of those kinds of things and how it might play into your interview. Do sell yourself and your skills and your talents. So this is your opportunity to tell the employer why you're qualified, what you can bring to them, and why you're interested in this position. And have some level of confidence and energy. People, I do notice, have all the qualifications, but sometimes don't always have the confidence. And that's noticeable. So if you do meet the qualifications and you do feel like you would do a good job in this position and you really want it, then have a little bit of confidence, and just have good energy while you're there. That employers definitely take note of that as well. Don'ts during an interview. So don't ask about salary or benefits. These kinds of things don't get brought up until after you've been offered a position. Don't criticize past employers' experiences or yourself. I know employers don't like when they speak negative about past supervisors or past companies. Just try to avoid it. If you had a bad experience, just don't bring it up. Try to say it in a positive way. Don't use nonverbal language. Again, that might be having your arms crossed, being closed off, or something like that. Not smiling. I also notice when people are just very professional, but also I don't get a sense of who they are because they're, they don't smile, or you don't get to see their personality come out during the interview because they're so focused on maintaining professionalism, which is important, but you also want the employer to get a sense of who you are as a person. So smiling is a good thing during an interview. Definitely don't chew gum or smoke during an interview. Those things look really bad. In a lot of places you can't smoke anyway. Don't act desperate for a job or as if you can get any job. I've seen this before too. And it seems like someone's just willing to take anything they can get, and that can be a turnoff for employers. Don't answer with just yes or no. You want to give in-depth responses to questions that you may get asked. And I'll go over a little bit of that later in the presentation. Don't discuss personal issues or family problems that doesn't pertain to the job, so don't even bring that up. And don't ask to skip questions. If you're really stumped on a question, again, it's okay to take a moment and think about it first, but don't ask to skip and come back to that question. So behavioral questions are questions that you might get asked during an interview. They might start off with, tell me about a time, or give me an example of. So these kind of questions employers are asking because they want to see how your past behavior will reflect your future behavior. So you might want to answer these questions in a SOAR or STAR format. So you want to state the situation, what was the obstacle or task, what action steps did you take, and what was the result. So there's a really good example of this on page 62 in our career guide, so you can see how you might answer a behavioral question in this format. But just keep this in mind. Don't forget one of these steps. Make sure you're answering the question using this format, and you're not. I do see a lot of students who might forget the end result, so that kind of leaves out a portion of that response. Some frequently asked questions might include, tell me about yourself, why do you want this job, why are you interested in this company, what are your strengths and weaknesses, where do you see yourself in 5 years, and why should I hire you? So these are just a few questions that you might get asked during an interview. You might not. You might get asked only some of these questions, but I would definitely be prepared to answer all of these questions before an interview. Illegal questions. So it is illegal to make an employment decision based on age, race, religion, national origin, veteran status, color, gender, disability, pregnancy, genetic information. So some questions that are illegal for employers to ask may include, what arrangements are you able to make for childcare while you work? Are you married? Will you need personal time off for particular religious holidays? How old are you, and when did you graduate from high school? So just be aware of these things. If they do come up to it during an interview, you don't have to answer them. And I almost would be a little worried why they did ask it. Sometimes they might not be aware that these are illegal, but just know that you don't have to answer questions that pertain to these things. Questions to ask the interviewer. So you want to prepare questions through company research. Again, it's your opportunity to interview the employer, and it demonstrates preparedness and interest. So examples of questions you might ask after an interview is, what makes this organization a great place to work? What do you consider the most important criteria for success in this job? Can you tell me about the company culture? How will my performance be evaluated? What are the opportunities for advancement? And what are the next steps in the hiring process? These are just a few examples, but obviously you can come up with your own questions to ask. Again, it's your chance to get a feel for if this is a good fit for you and if you can see yourself working there. Follow up after the interview. So make sure you send a thank you note after you completed the interview. You want to send within 24 hours. It establishes goodwill, expresses appreciation, strengthens your candidacy, puts a name in front of the employer one more time. When you're writing a thank you, you want to be specific about why you're interested in that position and how you will be a good fit for that organization. You can send this through a handwritten note or via email. Either one is perfectly fine. And you want to make sure you're sending it to the individuals that you interviewed with. Also, if they ask for references, make sure you're thanking your references as well. So sending them a little follow-up note after you've completed the interview would be a good idea. So if you need a job or internship, make sure you're looking on Handshake. You can access Handshake on your GoPFW account, the Career Development tab, Handshake, and then Jobs. So we update these every single day, so new jobs are posted on there, new internships are posted on there, so keep an eye out for that. If you're looking for any networking events, check out Handshake as well. Under your GoPFW, Career Development, Handshake, and Events, we have things like career fairs posted on there, and any event that involves an employer will be posted on there, so make sure that you're looking at that and getting a chance to network with companies of interest. The Connect is our student newsletter, so that will be sent out bi-weekly. We have new jobs and internships posted on there. Upcoming events will be posted on there, and we'll have videos for you to watch, different advice for your career, and things like that. So if you haven't checked out the Connect yet, I highly suggest you checking your email inbox and making sure that you're taking a look at this newsletter. Follow us on social media for any updates and any news going on. Here we have LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And that's all I have for you today, so thank you for taking the time to watch my presentation. And if you have any questions or concerns about interviewing or want to do a mock interview, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.